Let's return to our top story now. We've been discussing the Newspoll figures that have come out this morning, which show that the figures have basically stagnated over the summer. We haven't seen the government improve in its polling at all. We're hoping to speak to Simon Crean shortly on the program to get the government's take how it reads these figures. We've seen that primary support at 30% for the government and 45% for the coalition. So let's talk to Martin O'Shannessy now from Newspoll. And what can you tell us about these figures and why they haven't moved over the summer?
Well, it could well be that voters just hopped into the freezer over the summer and stopped listening. Clearly, we had a reasonably eventful summer with, of course, the pokies deal falling apart or changing, and, of course, the lobby restaurant affair. Some commentators are suggesting that these are yet to play out. Whether there'll be any effect, but when we look at what voters have told us, we have the primary votes virtually unchanged over the Christmas break. 1.4 for Labor, that's within the margin of error, and a 1 point rise for the coalition. 45 for the coalition, 30 for Labor. I guess the remarkable thing about that is that it is, I think, the lowest on record number that Labor has started a parliamentary year with. But aside from that, really no great change and still a comfortable lead to the coalition in the two-party stakes.
And given that the government backed down on pokies, would the coalition have been hoping for a better result?
Well, I don't know about that. It's hard to tell what the actual impact would be. I imagine that the government would have carefully looked at that decision before it went out. I think they would have both hoped for a better result than where they were at the end of last year. Certainly the government would be. People use terms like the killing zone and other words like that to refer to the Prime Minister's prospects when the Labor primary vote is so low. Although the coalition with a 45% primary vote, I think, would feel that they've done quite well and maintained a strong position throughout Tony Abbott's period as opposition leader.
One of the big issues that's still to be resolved for the government is that of asylum seekers. Did that come through in the polling at all? No special questions in there about asylum seekers or those other specific issues. So when we try to connect the events to the poll, it becomes a little bit speculative. Now, I think what we've got here, though, is no real change. I don't think either leader was able to score a decisive blow on the other. I think that became pretty clear as we watched what was going on over the period. And, probably they both had a well-deserved holiday. There was movement on the preferred Prime Minister figures, with Julia Gillard losing 3 points, but little difference in the satisfaction and dissatisfaction for both leaders. What do you put that down to?
Well, what we have here is a situation where both leaders are reasonably unpopular. It's not unusual to have an unpopular opposition leader or an unpopular Prime Minister. Very successful Prime Ministers such as Howard and Keating have both been unpopular for long periods of time. The long-run picture for the preferred or who would make the better Prime Minister question, though, is that Tony Abbott enjoyed a little bit of a period of a lead in September, October, but he now is not clearly ahead, and that's the important thing, of Julia Gillard. He's clearly behind. The difference between the two narrowed by about the margin of error, from about 6 or 7 points to about 3 points. And so while there is a slight change there, it's not enough for us to say there's a trend on.
So what does that mean for both leaders then and their parties? Would there be some backroom talk about both of their positions?
I would say in the case of the opposition leader, no. They do have a 45% primary vote, and I think they'd be rather comfortable with that. In the case of the Prime Minister, perhaps, but the question would be what effect on the faith of the voters would that have if we were looking at the Prime Minister again. So I imagine there may be talk, but I have a sense that we'll see quite a lot of Julia Gillard through the year.
Martin O'Shannessy from Newspoll, thank you for joining us.
Always a pleasure.